Forbes India presents AWS The Mavericks in association with Matrix Partners India.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Forbes India presents AWS The Mavericks, the CTO Conversation on data and analytics in association with Matrix Partners. To our audience who've joined us today, we hope you're staying safe during these particularly trying times as we go through a second wave of COVID-19. We joined this afternoon by a rather distinguished panel, the Mavericks of digital native business, who will throw some light on how businesses big and small are embracing big data and the role of data analytics as digital becomes the bespoke survival tool for businesses in the years to come. We joined this afternoon by Amit Sharma, the CTO of Dream11. I don't think he needs any introduction with the IPL starting tomorrow. Sanjeev Barnwal, the founder and CTO of Meesho, social commerce startup, who've just been valued at about $2.1 billion. Cameron Price, the head of data and analytics, Asia Pacific and Japan at AWS. Rajat Agrawal, the MD of Matrix Partners India, whose portfolio includes Chumbak, Ola, Practo, and many others. Nag Tota, the head of technology at Delivery, of course, the supply chain services company who played a critical role during the lockdown and even after that. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us at the Forbes India presents AWS The Mavericks, the CTO Conversation on data and analytics in association with Matrix Partners. There's certainly no doubt that 2020 changed our lives forever. Over the past year, across our daily lives, we've seen so much of our preferences, our tastes, and even the way we live change drastically. And every time we assume we can go back to the old ways, the ongoing crisis has a strange way of getting us back to the new normal. Across the business world, the past year was one where companies had to think out of the box and on their feet for survival and had to embrace years' worth of digital transformation within months. That has crucially also meant that the volume and variety of data that an organization holds or access today has grown significantly than it was a few years ago. Next year, and even this year, it'll be greater still. But as data resources grow, the opportunities to draw more profound, more powerful insights about customers, the competitive landscape, and internal processes will also change and become more available. Data is the new oil, but unrefined oil is just crude till it's refined to extract key byproducts. Imagine having advanced data analytics that give you the ability to see and predict everything, whether it's supply chain or customer preferences or financial transactions. In 2021, as we look to build back and run efficient businesses, data will play a significant role, not just in recovery, but in forging a long-term growth path. On that note, let me begin today's discussion with opening comments from all our panelists on how the last year has shaped our understanding of data, the nuances of data analytics, and how companies have taken a serious relook at how they view data. So let me start today's discussion with Amit and then invite opening comments from all our other panelists.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today, right, and looking forward to a great conversation. See, the last year has been very unusual. For us, it's been very challenging for everyone, right? And even for us at the beginning, for the first 2 months, there were almost no sports anywhere. And it was a very tricky times. But since then, it's actually turned out to be pretty well for us because as sports start coming back, Dream11 as a company has seen phenomenal growth over the last 1 year. Right? We crossed 100 million users. We won the title sponsorship for the IPL, and our engagement was an all-time high where we got more than 5 million users on our platform concurrently, right? And we realized that at the scale that we were at this point, no third-party solutions were actually going to serve our data needs. So we took the last 1 year and worked a lot on our in-house data platform, right? To make sure that, when we come out of this times and then sports will go back to 100% and we have to power all our features that we want to do in the coming IPL. So IPL starts tomorrow, right? So it's perfect timing for me to be here and talk about how pumped we are and excited about things that we're going to launch, right? So once you set up that in-house infrastructure, there are so many opportunities that become available to you, right? An amazing in-house data platform can kickstart your experimentation efforts, right? So we build our in-house experimentation platform on top of it, and we launched personalization features for our users. And based on all the data that we have now and the abilities that we have, we're launching some really cool product initiatives. Like we're very excited to announce, for example, we'll do gamification this IPL and have a lot of exciting features coming into our social features, right? So from that perspective, yeah, so we have tons and tons of data and we're trying to make the most out of it and hoping that this IPL will give an amazing user experience to all our users.
Absolutely. Sanjeev, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me here. I was super excited. So last year, of course, has been very difficult for everyone. For us, in fact, right after COVID, everything kind of, it was a lockdown, right? No goods moving at all. And for our users, for our entrepreneurs, it is very difficult because for them, Meesho is like they're earning, they're in some way running their household through Meesho. And suddenly, when you don't have non-essential goods moving around, their source of income goes away. So we had to immediately step up and kind of help them give new avenues of earning through digital goods, education packages, etc. In fact, to some extent, essential goods as well. So we had to immediately transition to a very different sort of business, probably in weeks, not even months. And there, of course, data has played a very important role because everything, whenever you do anything from 0 to 1, there are a lot of unknowns, right? And if you have the right data in place, and of course, data driven culture, which of course I believe is much more important. So basically, in Meesho, we have always felt that data engineering, data driven culture is more important than data engineering capabilities. And fortunately, we had focused on this right from the beginning. So that helps us a lot in kind of building up on new types of businesses or new types of categories, venture into new categories, and very quickly help our entrepreneurs start up to speed. And even now, right after that, a lot has changed. We have grown about 6x in last 1 year. We have ventured into a lot of personalization efforts as well. In fact, some of our the entire feed that you see in Meesho is completely personalized, where we saw up to 50% increase in core conversion metrics. All of this happened in the last 1 year itself.
So we'll probably get into the nuance of that in just a bit. Let me bring in Nag here. Nag, your opening thoughts on how things have changed in the past year, and the role of data in particular to that.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me for this conversation. So just to start off with, last year was really challenging, especially from the perspective of how we think about the data, and also the supply chain business itself has had a lot of transformational change, just because even though the city was sleeping, we were active because we started working with the government to make sure that we supply the PPE equipments, and all of this are like essential goods that we need to transfer from A to B, right? And it really helped us a lot from the data perspective. I think data is not new, right? We all know that data is going to play a very important role across the organization, right? So we had those platforms ready even before the pandemic hit us. But where we really got help from was how to use the data properly, right? And I take a couple of examples where we were really, really active, right? One of them was when the government came up and said, hey, we have these containment zones. How are you going to manage the containment zones and how are you going to deliver there, right? And there's no way we can find out through a pin code that, hey, this is where the containment zones are, right? So we got to look at our data from the address engine, identify what are the areas which is going to be the containment zones, whether it's a green or red or blue, and also identify what kind of products we can deliver there. Because when we talk about goods, I think probably you already know that there are only essential goods which have been allowed to go and serve, right? And the question is that essential means that is really essential to the whole public. And how do we make sure that we get that on time, right? So, and identifying what product is actually essential is also very critical, because I know that there are a lot of e-commerce companies who didn't understand what product categories go into the essential and what not. And since we had that data categorization, understand the whole picture on data categorization, we were able to go and then identify and able to support both ends, the clients who are our e-commerce engines and also the customers who needs to be delivered. And I think that it transformed us not just from the perspective of this, but also in terms of business side. Like everyone wants to know what they can do and what data they can have, right? And a couple of things I can think about is that data itself has no meaning until you put some meaning in there, right? And we had worked a lot in terms of making the data more, I would say, meaningful through data cataloging and a bunch of other things over the last 1 year. And we are right now in a position where I feel that as a company, we are more resilient to all these pandemics and lockdowns.
Absolutely. Rajat, you work with a lot of companies. So has there been a sort of a mindset change that has happened in the last 1 year?
Yeah, so last year has been strange, but companies, especially resource-constrained companies, have had to work extra hard, right, and become more efficient and deliver the same service for cheaper or target new sources of revenue. And data has played a key role in doing all of that, right? So across the portfolio, probably a data scientist or a data analyst is perhaps getting hired much earlier than what we used to see in the earlier days. And it's resulting in, as I said, whether it's helping you to generate more revenue, optimize pricing, or even improve your operational efficiencies, or even customer experience, right? So ranging from personalization on, portfolio companies like Daily Hunt or Josh, to edtech companies using data to actually slice and dice their free user base to see who and why who they should pitch to become paid customers, or e-commerce companies trying hard to reduce their RTOs or COD related costs by figuring out which customers should they show what kind of payment options. So across the board, we've seen whether it's fintech companies, commerce companies, consumer brands, everyone's right now woken up to the power of data and what they can do to improve their business.
Understood. Cameron, from a global point of view, I mean, how different was last year, and particularly taking on from what Rajat just spoke about, and about how companies are sort of adapting to this new reality with data being at the center.
Yeah, thanks, Manny. Thanks for having me. I think what my colleagues are talking about there is a trend that we saw globally and obviously regionally, where in a very, very short space of time, customers were looking to extract more value from their data, but they were struggling, to capture and store and analyze all that data. And also against that backdrop of the year, which was essentially a massive increase in change, a massive increase in disruption, whether it was changing customer expectations, new channels, new products in a lot of cases, not to mention the competition was still there. So new players were still looking to enter the market. So there was still that as well. And organizations suddenly realized that they really needed an extensive breadth of services. And really that was about, what was the right tool for the right job at the right time? How do I do that? And a lot of customers just weren't ready for that. And how do I get to that outcome? How do I predict as quickly as I can and take action quickly? And that's the whole year was like that. And so this year is still the same as we currently live through these strange times.
Amit, so just sort of take us through, what are some of the big decisions that you can actually take using data? How you guys at Dream11 been sort of using data in the past few years?
Yeah, so we have 5 core values, right? The other 4 being ownership, high performance, user first, and transparency. But one of the most important core values that we have is data obsession, right? So because of that culture, so we operate in a system of pods. So we have a very small teams. We like to run in a decentralized manner, right? And especially during the last 1 year when everyone is working from home, we want these units to be completely independent, right? And run with speed. But at the same time, we cannot compromise on the quality of the decisions and also not compromise on security. So the way we enable that is by having a decision framework that is backed by data. Once you have this standardized process, I think almost all decisions can be taken using data, right? And so for us, for example, in a product like ours, B2C product, right? Like think about the entire customer journey, right? At the acquisition stage, we use data to optimize our conversion funnels. once we get the user on board, right, we have to give a great user experience. So from the engagement and interaction perspective, we power personalization and run a lot of experiments to understand what does the user actually want, right? Then for retention perspective, the ability to actually send the right communication to the user at the right time, sending them the right promotion becomes important. For the entire journey, we can actually use data and make those decisions, right? But at the same time, you can do all of this if you trust the data that you have, right? So that data hygiene and data quality also becomes very important, right? If you have the right, if you have an experiment set up, the right instrumentation, and a rigorous statistical analysis, I think almost all decisions can be taken using data. But remember, data can only give you 90%, 95%, 99%, right? There is always like a 1% gut involved, right? So the way you get the most out of data is by asking the right questions, right? And that you can do by constantly evaluating the decisions that you've taken using data in the past. So we have a system of hypothesis. So every time we try to do something, we set up a hypothesis to do things, and then we match it about actuals. So the drift between the hypothesis and actuals is something that you need to constantly monitor to be able to set up the right hypothesis in the future and see if you're actually using the data the right way and making the right decisions.
Understood. I think we'll get into that, the data hygiene bit in just a bit in some time. But let me bring Sanjeev here. Sanjeev, for you and at Meesho, take us through, what are some of the key decisions that you've been, taking with the help of data from starting out, the customer journey and retention and all of that.
Yeah. So I think in Meesho, right from day zero, we had very strong instrumentation of behavioral analytics. So we were using mixed panel then, but it kind of very easily exposes you to all the important metrics that you want to look at, right from which acquisition channel is working out well for you to all your funnels, right? Sign up funnel, onboarding funnel, checkout funnel, everything. So right from the beginning, we had very good visibility into what is working out well and what is not. In fact, one decision that we took in the initial stages, which has worked out really well, was invest in the very good A/B experimentation platform. So when you say that you want to empower your team to make decisions themselves, you need to give them a tool, and data plays a very important role there. So in our case, where again, very similar to what Amit said, right? Decisions are made in a decentralized manner. What we do is almost everything that we do is backed by some data, which is right from out of these 10 problem statements, what do you want to prioritize for next quarter? That is backed by data. Out of this, which solution works out well for you? For example, in personalization algorithm itself, you have 2-3 variants. Which one will work out well? Very difficult to, you can rule out some of these solutions through gut feeling, but you need some data to kind of validate your hypothesis. And that is where this A/B experimentation platform plays a very important role. So, right, because of that, over time, the kind of culture that we have developed, it's always been a strongly data-driven. And even now, like each team has its own set of, always in every startup, every team has its own KPIs. What we have done is taken it to next level and made it easily accessible to everyone. So one question that we often ask ourselves is, how long does it take to retrieve data for a specific problem statement? Because it's all about speed. Whenever something breaks, whenever you want to take decisions, it could be tactical, could be strategic. How quickly are you able to access that data is very important. And that is where we have invested a lot. Each team has its own set of dashboards, which almost in near real time get access to different types of metrics. And even simpler things like you release an offer or you release a banner, whether this is the right decision or not. Has the banner gone out really well? Is the color good? Are the right products tagged in the banner, etc. All of this is available in almost real time, which helps a lot in making these decisions quicker.
So how much of investments, have you really put into this, and how quickly do you get your, insights from this?
Right. So we have focused on it from day zero, right? This is what I said. So even now we have a dedicated data engineering team, which pulls data from multiple sources, does all the enrichment through ETL pipelines, etc., denormalizes it to make sure, because in data, when you have, so the current scale that we have is we process about 8 billion events per day. about 2.4 petabytes of data is crunched on a daily basis. At this scale, you just cannot afford to not do denormalization, and that too specific to different use cases of teams. And that is where we have invested a lot. A lot of thinking has gone behind what kind of use cases do we want to support, so that it is easier for people to pre-compute it and access it on a very quick, in a very speedy manner.
Absolutely. Rajat, I mean, when we talk about day zero for companies that are starting out, are companies really paying so much attention towards data from when they start out, and what can they essentially do? I mean, they don't have so much data available to them when it comes later. So what can companies do on that front?
I think at the outset, you do need to have the mindset that data will be important for your business and start measuring things, right? Even if you don't know what you'll do with it, at least start collecting stuff, right? Like I work with a lot of fintech companies, for example, some of them are NBFCs who give loans. Often initially, their risk models are not based on their own data; they are lookalike models. But over a period of time, once they start collecting all kinds of user information and data from their applications, from their existing borrowers, that data is often helpful after a year or two. But the net, you have to have that mindset and start acting on it from day one, as as Sanjeev was saying. Set up the right tooling, set up the right teams, so that you can act on it when you really need to. Depending on the business, sometimes you can just at least the basics of A/B testing, at least the basics of how using data feedback to build the right product. All of that you can just do from day one.
But you're seeing that sort of trend. I mean, people are more aware of these things right now.
Yeah. People are more aware, and I'll give you a different funny example. We as a VC firm are trying to figure out how data can help us in our business. We've just commissioned a project to help us source deals faster by looking at various data signals that are available today. Hedge funds in the US do it all the time, but we're seeing if we can apply that to the VC ecosystem as well. So let's see if that is successful or not, but very interesting one that we've just kickstarted.
Absolutely. Cameron, let me bring, what are your thoughts on, the trends that you're seeing, as far as companies are concerned? Are they doing enough on managing data?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting conversation, and look, there's two themes I think that come out through that conversation there. One is experimentation. We heard that word a lot, right? And I think beyond the components of machine learning and artificial intelligence, just the general data platforms themselves, moving into that world of experimentation, that's very different. Historically, our data platforms were quite bespoke. They were built for a certain purpose, and then now these are expected to extend to a lot of different personas, whether they're human or machine, and that's been a big challenge. And last year has accelerated that significantly. So how do I build that ability to have experimentation right through my platform? And then the second is agility. So how do I do this at speed? So if I want to experiment, I can't experiment and not be agile. I need both. The danger is we build platforms that are designed for experimentation only, and therefore we also miss out on a broader opportunity. But customers are starting to really realize that, and those that are sort of leapfrogging ahead understand that and how to do that at scale. And we're seeing that a significant uptake of these kind of approaches. So it'll be an exciting change in the industry over the next 24 months.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, for you at delivery as well, how does this really help in predicting risk and in operational decisions? How important is that?
Sure, I think yes. If you look at logistics space, I think we are heavy on operations driven, right? So more and more, you look at operations, it's predicting the unpredictability, right? That's what the importance is all about, right? So how do we tackle that is that ingesting the right data and making sure all the data is high quality, and making sure that we make the data, which is actually raw, into very meaningful, and then also creating those data marts, which are more decentralized and also able to make it more self-serviceable. That means that any domain driven can come in and say, hey, what should I do with this? And how can I experiment with this? Because if you augment AI or machine learning on top of it, then you're going to do experimentation around that, right? That's where the Cameron is talking about. How do you make it agile, right? That means that the first thing about is collection. Other one is that how you're going to make it more meaningful. The third thing is around how I can use that meaningful information to better it, right? So a simple example I give you is that I can tell you, like, there's two ways to ask the same question about my truck, right? If I have a truck which is running within India, there's a question saying that, where is my truck? You can tell you that, hey, it's in here, right? But the better question might be that, when will it arrive to my facility is a better question to ask, right? And how is it going to impact my load, and how is it going to impact my facility in terms of how we're going to manage the load is more better answerable through that, right? So this asking the right questions and building those theories around that is very important. And that's where we strive on. I think we build our data as a product, not as a afterthought. That's a bigger problem, right? And a lot of times, I think what I've seen, we do a lot in other companies also, is that they don't think data. There's always an afterthought. But I think if you look at us, we have been really evangelizing on thing called as data as a product. And we are thinking about things like data meshing, right? Basically, you mesh your data, figure out how you can create your domain, and able to go and experiment and do whatever you want to do, right? And make it self-serviceable and use, thanks to AWS, by the way. I think AWS has done a fantastic job working with us to create that flow and able to give us this tools which actually enable us to do those things.
So, Amit, in that sense, how do you ask the right questions? I mean, you spoke about data hygiene earlier. So, how do you ask the right questions, and what are sort of, I mean, why do you need those right analytical tools to get those right answers?
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way, right? I mean, as you scale as a company, so I'll talk from our experience, right? As you scale as a company, some of the key features of your business model probably will not work if you don't have the right data analytics in place, right? So I'll give you an example. So we are into daily fantasy sports, right? So we have contests that run on our product. So for bigger games, the smallest contest size is 2 members. The largest that we have is like 8.5 million entries in a single contest. And we have like millions of contests, right? If we underfill contests, it actually hits us in a certain way. And if we actually fill all the contests, it's an opportunity loss for us, right? Now, the ability to be able to generate these contests, right, across games, across sports, with various interest levels around the clock, right? That's simply not possible if you don't invest into our machine learning algorithms and in our data analytics infrastructure, right? And now, since we've been working here for years, we've been able to develop an algorithm where every single contest on our platform is completely automated, right? And we have a fill rate of more than 99.9%. But that kind of precision at the scale that we're running is not going to be possible if you don't invest in data and don't think about it right at the very early stage. So the one point that I would like to make is, your data-driven culture starts very early, but the way you analyze data changes as you progress as a company. In the very early stage, you don't want to get into infrastructure, right? Choose the off-the-shelf products, use whatever you need to do to get it up and running. And your thought and your time should be spent on data and not on how to use the tooling to actually get it done, right? It's available out there today, right? Especially with cloud providers like AWS, GCP, etc. And as you mature as a company, you start replacing each tool one by one as they don't scale for you or if you have a different use case, right? And then slowly you move to a place where you know that exactly what you need and start investing heavily in your own infrastructure. And second, and very early stage, it's very easy to get too data driven, right? You need to know that, as you mature as a company, yes, data is important at every stage. I don't want to dispute that at all. But then initially, when you're trying to find product market fit, you need to be a little bit more about, trying to use your own judgment as well. So that balance is also very important.
With you as well, I mean, and is that something that you see? I mean, are we, our company is more too data driven in their early stages now, or and do they need to use their judgment very early on?
Sorry, I was on mute. That classic thing of our times. Yeah, look, at Amazon, the way we look at these things is, 90% of what we do and what we build is what customers ask, and it's very, very clear over the last year that, a bit like what Amit is saying, is customers are really asking us to provide the capability that removes that heavy lifting, so that your workforce and your resources and your capability can focus on that high value work, rather than managing the tools, managing the widgets, Even managing the data in a lot of aspects, so you can focus on predictive analytics and those kind of aspects. Focus on optimizing supply chains, driving customer experiences, building smart assets, all of that good stuff that we want to get to. Being able to pivot the workforce to that, and to be able to do that, we need to increase efficiency. So there's been a real focus at AWS over the last 24 months, and obviously heavily last year, around those kind of capabilities.
But
allowing customers to move to self-service.
So do you, in that sense, taking on what Amit spoke about, at every stage, you sort of come out, you have programs to help companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and to Amit's point, it's actually not about the technology, right? So, about 95% of the barrier you'll find is culture, and the culture of data. Building that culture of data into a company is really important. And Amazon stands side by side with the customers through that whole journey, through guilds and all sorts of other programs, to help customers build that muscle, build that data muscle, as we would call it.
Absolutely. Sanjeev, let me come to you here. Since the past 1 year, since a lot of digitalization has been taking place, a lot of data breaches and things like that have also been taking place. So, how can companies sort of ensure adequate security and privacy as we sort of adopt more data first insights and things like that?
Well, that is a very important question, because this time when we're collecting a lot of data to make critical decisions, making sure that data is safe is definitely a big responsibility of every company. And I think the way we do it, and again, from our learning, one is definitely you should always anonymize your data, right? Be it you're exposing this data to analysts or product managers or business folks, just using simple tools like data masking or even format preserving encryption, right? To just make sure, if you want to do data sanity checks, etc., format preserving encryption does work well, right? But that anonymizing data is very important, and you will be able to derive almost all insights through that anonymized data, right? Even if you want to look at, let's say, how many unique users are kind of buying this product, or what are your conversion metrics from view to maybe click to share, etc. All of that can be extracted from an anonymized data as well. You don't necessarily have to expose the real data. And second, which is again very important, is proactively trying to safeguard your PII data, which is personal identifiable information, right? All your phone numbers, emails, address, everything. So how do you preserve that? And very specifically in a hyper-scaling phase, right? You do tend to take a lot of shortcuts, which is if you want to, let's say, send bulk SMSs, you want to share this with someone who then uploads it to a portal. Now, proactively preventing that, or at least building processes around it, so that there's a lot of friction in accessing any PII data, and that too in a time-bound fashion, is extremely important. And we have seen this work out really well for us.
Nag, is that how you've also been doing? Has that been your approach as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think one thing is that if you're looking at data analytics perspective, right? I think you don't need data to be like, I don't need a phone number, right? I need a masking which I can use to understand. And if you look at a lot of things we do around location based, right? Location is all about an address, right? And whether you try to find the property to be a commercial property or it's an apartment, these things can be found out through address location, and using this masking is going to help us a lot, right? So I want to just step back a little bit and also talk about what is privacy and what is the data security, right? There are two different problems, but it's very similar, right? Privacy talks about more about collection of data, how you make sure that you give the freedom to the customer not to be used everywhere where you want it to be, right? So you keep those checks and policies in place, and we have those, right? We make sure that everything we have a policy for, and don't allow those policies. And we also classify the data so in such a way that we know this is a PII data and this is not, right? And how you use them across the board, right? Then there is a data security, which is more to do with how to give the accessibility to a particular person or a team, right? Just like what you're talking about, right? Like, can I give a bulk access to someone? Absolutely no, because if it's a PI data, you don't want to do it, right? Can I give access to certain things which may be required? For example, if I have a rider on field and he wants to make a call, does he need a number? No, right? You can always mask and give them some information which can tell him that You can call the customer through some masking, right? So we did all this stuff to make sure that all the data is protected. And we also do things like monitoring. For example, we monitor through our systems and see if there's any suspicious activity happening around, right? And make sure that we don't allow those things and have all these alarms and triggers which will tell me that there's something happening around, right? Because a lot of times it's all about malicious and suspicious activities which also come into picture. So we do take care of both ends. And if you look at European GDPRs or HIPAA rules and other things, right? They define you the framework. They never tell you what to do, right? The problem is that how, as a company, you build your design inherently is very important, and that comes to the culture, and that's where we also thrive to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Rajat, in that sense, do you think companies have that culture, that being responsible towards their customers whose data they actually, at the end of the day, using for their success? Is that culture embedded there?
I think it's getting there. It's not there yet. I think so the large companies, for sure, it's there, right? That's what we hope, or we see at least in the portfolio as well. But among the younger ones, I think there is still a gap. And what my recommendation to startups would be to start thinking about this really in a big way. Recently, I think McKinsey had done a survey of some American users, and about 87% or some crazy number actually said that they will stop working with a company if they suspect the security issues are not solved for in that company, right? So it is business critical. It's always been, but it's much more so now. And companies do need to take this seriously. So whether it's working with security consultants or auditing, getting a security audit done more frequently than they used to, I think all of those things companies should be thinking much earlier than what they used to back in the day.
Right.
And interestingly, I'll also give you another tidbit that we've just funded an education company. Guess what's the first course that they're going to launch? It's cybersecurity. So in India. So this company has just got started. So it is the need of the hour, and people are responding to it.
Absolutely. We hope more people are taking up those jobs and programs. But let me bring in Amit before I go to Cameron here. If at all, and we're talking about these data breaches happening now. If and when they happen, what is the best way for a company to sort of react and respond to that?
Yeah. So I think it depends on the situation, right? I think the first and foremost thing is to really understand the impact, right? Because it's very easy to actually create panic in a situation like that, right? So really, you first need to, there's a balance between, waiting for the right time to communicate to the users, but at the same time, making sure that you know exactly the implications, what exactly has happened, right? And what is the potential data leak that has happened, and then communicate to the users in the efficient manner, right? And at the same time, I think you need to inform authorities as well, because data is not about users only. I mean, there's user trust, etc. But at the same time, it also has legal implications, right? So from that perspective, I think it's much better to be proactive and protecting your data rather than to find yourself in that situation. And I think one point I wanted to make was, just like data-driven culture, I think security first principle is also a part of the culture, right? So like data privacy and security, like for example, for us, a security personnel is actually embedded in each of our pods. Every decision that is made, every product feature, any tool that is evaluated, at every point of time, we make sure that there's a security sign-off. This can actually feel like an overhead at times, but but these kind of measures actually make sure that every single person in the company is actually thinking about security at all the time, right? And only then you'll be able to safeguard data that you have and all the other information, etc.
Understood. Cameron, what can companies at best do when there's big data leaks happening and when it's up for sale on the dark web?
Yeah, I think that security is your number one principle is key, right? So if you look at all the services that we provide, security is number one. It's built into everything that we do, and sure, there's flexibility in there for what customers would like to do with that, but ultimately security is absolutely number one by design. It's not an option. If we look at data itself, I think treating data as an asset and as a product as such, and building elements around that again is also key. And the services are there to allow you to automatically scan for PII data when you're trying to comply with GDPR and other types of rules like that, or scanning for outliers, scanning for threats in data, anomalies in data. All of those kind of capabilities are available. So we work really closely with customers to help them through that journey. It's part of maturity as well as customers go on that journey, and it's key we stand there with them to enable that capability.
Understood. Sanjeev, while we're talking about all of this, what are some of the key or major hurdles and obstacles, for realizing big value from data? And of course, Internet of Things. Are they related to technology, business applications, or just lack of organizational understanding and alignment?
No, I think it's both. First and foremost, of course, that feeling of data being very important and critical, and all of that is, in some sense, driven by founders as well, right? The way you start, the way you build that culture. But once you have cleared that hurdle, definitely the next biggest hurdle is how do you make data accessible at this scale, right? When you are growing very quickly, that is when, like Amit rightly said, right, that build versus buy decision is very important. Because if you start investing too much in your initial years itself, you won't be able to focus on the right problems which you need to solve, where you want to grow very quickly. So probably that build versus buy decision will have to be evaluated every year, probably in a hyperscaling phase. So in fact, we started with a ready-to-use tool, right? And then year on year, as we started scaling, as our data requirements grew, we gradually ventured into building all of this in-house, which even there we have iterated a lot, right? Of course, with AWS Redshift being a data warehouse, which is readily available and very easy to use, all of that was very helpful for us and has helped us reach a certain scale. But at this scale, we have kind of started gathering data at a pace which becomes almost impossible to crunch with Redshift as well. And that is where we have now started investing in data lake capabilities, for example. Right. But all of this is very critical because all the choices that you make will decide how easily and effectively your team will be able to gather insights. So for example, the way we build our data lake, it is very easy for our data science team to personalize. In fact, personalization took just about a quarter to show about 50% improvement in conversion metrics, which is very difficult at our scale because a lot of companies struggle at a stage when they don't have enough data to run those machine learning algorithms. So that is why focus from the beginning, even if you don't know or don't have clear visibility on where this data will be helpful, probably it just makes a lot of sense to have some data around it, which you can use later in your journey.
Nag, what are some of the major hurdles, and obstacles, in realizing those big values? Is it related to organizations or technology?
So, yeah, sure. So I think it depends on where we are in the journey. I think if you ask me the same question like 3 years back, I would have said that, hey, look, I think how do you really get the right data ingestion is a problem, right? We were trying to solve the problem saying, how do you get all the information and data into one location, right? Where can I put my data lakes? Where can I put my data marts, right? So we took the journey of making sure all the data gets ingested properly. And we also, then the second issue which came out last year and 2 years back was more to do with how do I make it more meaningful, right? And then we started putting a lot of efforts into making it more meaningful. And now the third journey which we are taking right now is trying to figure out how do you want to create those data marts, which are very much domain specific, so that they can any business can start using it through self-serviceable. But one of the reasons why I want to do self-serviceable is because a lot of the business folks who wants to use this, they are very much against the technology, right? They think that its technology is not an easy thing. They need to write all these big queries to understand the data and all, right? So we are trying to make it easy for them now, right? So the journey is always going to go on, right? And the tools that we use across and how you do the rendering and other things going to change. So I would say that is always a journey. And right now we are in a journey where we want to make sure we understand the patterns, we understand the serviceability, understand how we can give all this product as a data to our business folks so that they can start using it maturely, right? That's the intent.
But I think Nag makes a very important point here, right? I mean, I think it's very well said, right? That hurdles are different at different stages, right? Yeah. Like for me, I have an amazing data platform. I have experimentation setup. I have everything, right? My challenge is now for every single pod that we have to actually use the experimentation platform, integrate their microservices with it, right? Make sure that everything that they think of, run in the experimentation first philosophy. So right from product to design to tech, everyone needs to start changing and thinking differently, right? So going from running like 10 experiments a week to like maybe 100 experiments a week and increasing that number. And that can only happen if we reduce the cost of experimentation. Because if the cost of experimentation is high, people will be very hesitant because they want speed. They want to deliver value to users, right? So at this stage of where we are, I think this becomes a very one of the biggest hurdles that we have right now. Whereas all the problems of ingestion and accesses of data and speed and real time, all of that is solved. And this is always, once we solve this, I'm pretty sure there'll be something else that will be the future. So at every stage, it's very different.
Absolutely. So how do you sort of build a culture of of being data obsessed across teams? Where you can empower them to completely be independent, and then without compromising quality and security.
Yeah. So as I said, right. So the core value helps, the founder's vision helps, right? How you want to do things, right? So we right at the beginning, years back, we've had a heal process, right? So hypothesis, expectations, actions, and learning. We've been following that process for each and every decision that we take at Dream level, right? And over a period of time, that has scaled very, very well. And the more the leadership actually talks about how this is important, the culture of experimentation, data, doing things the right way, how to make decisions, right? The more the culture spreads. Like, for example, lately we've been doing sessions, right? We're doing weekly sessions on how to do experimentation, right? How to look at data. What is the right way to look at data? What are the pitfalls in actually, when you don't use the right statistical analysis of data, how actually you can make decisions based on data, which are actually not the right decisions. So this kind of education across the teams, conversations, and then tracking, right? So we are encouraging people to actually have one center place. So the in-house A/B test experimentation platform that we built. So we built it in a way where every single person, not only across Dream 11, right, which is an entity, but under the Dream Sports umbrella, which is the parent company of Dream 11 and other entities that are coming in, everything sits in one central place. So that availability of that access to actually see all the experiments that are being run across the board, what is successful, what is not. The more you see it, the more you educate people, the more you actually expose people to this. Automatically, the culture actually keeps shifting, right? And then people start understanding how to make decisions based on data and move on.
Let me just bring in Rajat here. Rajat, do you sort of agree with that when it comes to companies? And the other bit I also want to know is, we're talking about youngsters who are in colleges, studying right now. Can culture be sort of imbibed in them very early, in the learning stages as well?
Look, I think what Amit just talked about is probably gold standard. I haven't seen anything better than that. And it's close to what each of these the companies, the founders have accomplished. And I guess to me, the core is if you're living and breathing it, and if every decision that you're taking is based on data, it just sets the right culture that way. If you're asking about college kids, the kids these days are much more exposed than what we ever were. I think again, just even a chemical engineer or a mechanical engineer today is just learning how to code first than anything else, right? So the next generation will be much more data oriented. I have no doubts, and we are seeing that in our own cousins and everyone that we meet, right? So I don't know if anything else is needed. Honestly, I'd be happy for others to chime in as well.
Absolutely. Please, we've got a couple of questions that have come. Audience, feel free to add more to them. We've got one for Amit. Amit, you spoke about building personalized experience for users. How do you tackle privacy and ensure the security of customer data?
I think these things are very standard, right? I think other members have already covered this, right? The simple process, right? So first and foremost, you take all the PII information about users and anonymize that. That is step one, right? Only in extreme circumstances where someone needs to actually contact the user using their email or phone numbers from a senior customer success executive. Only in those special cases, or we need some information to actually send some emails, SMSs, etc. through some tools, right? You build tooling in a way that even while communicating to users, no one gets access to that. So that is step number one, right? Second, providing data is great, but so the culture at Dream 11 is to give everyone more data that they need to do their job, right? So that means that although everyone will have the data, there are checks and balances, right? So we make sure there are access controls. So we have a matrix, 7 different dimensions in this way, 4 this way, to make sure that who has access to transaction data, who has access to user data. So at different levels, people have different kinds of accesses. And then on top of that, we have logging, right? So it's not only about just giving access through checks and balances. We also have a complete history of what data is being actually, looked at by which person, right? So this is about data privacy and how we look at it. On the other hand, as I said about security first principle, we have systems across, right? So we have 100 plus microservices. We have data scattered. We have a data lake. We have a warehouse. We have an in-house real-time system. We have Druid. So data is also scattered everywhere, right? So we also have to protect our entire infrastructure. So we have a first grade security team that actually constantly checks for vulnerabilities. We not only do internal checks, we get external audits, external validations. We also have a bug bounty program. We've actually gone down and enrolled in multiple bug bounty programs where we have ethical hackers trying to constantly find vulnerabilities into our system, right? And then once we get to know them or something is there, we actually fix them. So it all goes back to security first principle, right? So making sure that we take everyone in the company understands how critical it is for us to have our user trust, and users are only going to trust us and use our product if they're guaranteed there is absolutely nothing wrong happening and their data is absolutely safe with us.
Absolutely. Before I take on the second question from the audience, I just wanted to bring Cameron here to the earlier point I'd asked Rajat about building a culture of being data obsessed across teams and sort of doing fast-paced execution without compromising on quality and security. So how do you do that, Cameron?
Yeah, sure. I think back to an answer I had to one of the questions before about the barrier to realizing the value of data, being culture, and 95% of cases for business adoption, and we see that across 3 dimensions really. One is organization. So organization's about building a community, and it comes back to data democratization, right? And breaking down those silos. So it's IT and business working together. IT is an enabler, and not locking up data into silos. So that's sort of super important. And IT is also the glue between that. The second is governance. So governance, we talk about governance a lot, but historically governance has been there to restrict rather than enable. So how do you move to obviously security and privacy in there by design, but then how do you move to really data stewardship instead of data ownership? And again, that's all about breaking down silos, moving to a distributed data governance model with a light central touch. So we're seeing those kind of approaches becoming very, very popular these days. And the third is execution. So at Amazon, we have something called working backwards from the customer, which a lot of our customers hear about a lot. And that's just really, what is your strategy around capturing your data and mapping that right back to the outcome. So it's, outcome to use case to architecture to data, and the fluidity within that. Again, all about getting to faster data democratization. So those 3 dimensions, and again, we work really closely with customers to help them through that as they move through their maturity gates. Right.
There's another question that's come to us, and which is the best business intelligence tool for MIS. That's come from Vineet Sharma. I think Cameron will have one answer, but let me ask all the others. Somebody would like to answer that? Or would you guys want to skip that question?
Honestly, there are a lot of them, right? It depends. So nowadays there's so much overlap between the capabilities of various different tools, right? People use different things, right? Some have Looker, some have Tableau, right? People use different visualization tools. Some people, use the native tools provided by QuickSight are all provided by AWS, right? So it depends, right? So your entire stack of your data platform, right? And some people have multiple, right? So you have to evaluate what you need, what is the right pricing for you, where does your data sit, what are your most important things that you actually want to do, and you just have to pick one that is right for you. It's very difficult to say that there's one tool that is better than everything else out there. Right. I don't know if others have any comments. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
Would you want to?
I just want to add one more thing. I think I agree with Amit on this. It's very important that we understand what are the use cases. I think working backward from the customer, right? What does the customer want? And how do you look at the customer and then choose the tools which are really equipped to do that, right? I think where we actually try to falter is try to choose a tool before we understand the use cases. I think should do other way. Identify what are the use cases we have, and figure out what is it we're trying to do, and then think about how we can fit in right intelligence tools that can fit in. For example, we use multiple tools today, right? We use Redash, we use Tableau, we also use QuickSight, depending on what are the use cases what we try to serve for, right? So it's very important to understand the use case first and work backward.
Right. I think with that, I don't think there are any more questions from the audience. And so let me sort of, because we are short on time, let me invite sort of closing comments from all of you gentlemen, and maybe you can throw some light on a use case from 2020, the COVID year, that stands out for you in retrospect, and what the future actually will look like from now. Well, I'm so sorry. Before I take closing comments, there's one question that's come. We sell our products in marketplaces in India. Do you know any bots or solution that crawls all these platforms and can provide us the right data and give us data analytics on how our product or catalog is performing platform-wise? How AWS data analytics tool can help us in taking decisions to our business growth? I think Cameron can have a go at that question.
Yeah, look, thank you. Pretty broad question. I go back to the working backwards comment. We probably need to learn a little bit more about this use case and work backwards on what's actually required there. And then, because it's very broad and there's lots of different tools available in what you're trying to achieve. So I'd encourage you to reach out offline post this session, and we can assist further with that.
Okay, right. Anybody else would like to sort of give their comments on this, or shall we move to closing comments?
I think when you try to scrape a lot of platforms and get performance, there are proxy metrics, right? You have ratings, reviews, where this exact item is placed in the entire feed, etc. So there are a lot of proxy metrics which will give you some sense of how your product is performing in different marketplaces. But again, you'll have to custom build it, right? You'll have to pick and choose different building blocks, probably collate it, and then get to the final result. There's no one tool to rule them all, kind of thing.
Absolutely. So on that note, let me sort of invite closing comments from all of you gentlemen, since we are running really short on time. I mean, how 2020 was and some use case that you might have, and what the future actually will look like with data being at the center of everything that we plan to do. Amit, maybe you would like to go first, and then I'll...
Yeah, so see, Dream11 is like the category creator for fantasy sports, right? Daily fantasy sports in India, right? But at this point, there are 200 plus fantasy sports provider in India. So for us now, it's becoming a question of differentiating ourselves with our scale and our experience from the rest, right? That's where I think what we are moving towards is a complete personalized product. And that's been one of the most exciting features that we launched last year is our contest personalization. So we personalize our contest screen, right, for our users. And that was one of the key features that we launched last year. We've got great adoption. Around 85% of our transactions within the first 4 months of launch are actually coming from a for you section that we actually, a recommended section that we actually created for our users. So that's been one of the commendable achievements that we've actually had, and notable memory. And we as a company, we started with Dream11, we have Dream Sports, and now we are hoping that, as we build the sports ecosystem and the new entities that we launch under Dream Sports, we hope to use the data across these industries and create synergies and make the most out of all the data that we have of our users and give great user experience across product categories to all our users.
Absolutely. Sanjeev, your final thoughts?
Yeah, at Meesho, of course, we are working with the vision of enabling 100 million small businesses in India to succeed online, right? And as we embark on our next journey from here, targeting 10x growth, so data is going to play a very important role. Being a marketplace, even simpler efforts like how do you personalize the entire experience for your user, for suppliers, to putting in fraud control mechanisms, it's definitely going to be very important for us. But even beyond that, right, building up on top of the data-driven culture that we have, the ideal goal is to kind of reach a stage where anyone, right, not just BAs or developers or someone who can code, basically try to build a zero code solution. Basically, you become truly data driven when you have a zero code solution to access data. That is when you will enable everyone, including business folks, anyone who wants to, who has the passion to kind of figure out problems in an organization and try to solve it. That is when we'll become truly data driven. And that is another goal that we have specifically for the data engineering platform.
Absolutely. Nag, have you set similar goals for yourself?
Yes, I think, again, as said like earlier, it's always a journey and we never end in the data side. And obviously, we're reaching to 1 billion packages in next few days. So we have enough data. I think most importantly, there are three things which I think we stress a lot on. Of course, is where we talk about data governance and make sure that we put all the plugs in place to make sure the data is secured. The second piece, which is going to be very important, is that how can I use the data to do automation around and do augmented AI and look at some patterns to define and then suggest the business, right? That's where our focus is going to be a lot, right? Because we are very operational heavy and we want to move from a system guided to a system directed and automation. Basically, we want to give not the tools, but also tell the operation what to do, right? So ours is going to be a little bit more peculiar because we want to make sure that we give them real-time data decision making and also give them what is required so that they can make very good decisions on the field. And that's going to be our goal going forward.
Absolutely. Rajat, your closing thoughts on the role that big data will play in the coming years?
No, the next decade is going to be very exciting. Indian startup ecosystem is maturing. This conversation has been fabulous. It's just heartening to see how companies are using data and solving for not just customer-focused issues, but their own efficiency-related issues as well. And I think truly India-specific problems can be solved, are beginning to get solved using data. We are seeing that in the new companies that we meet as well. So we are very excited, and overall, whether it's tooling companies or as Sanjeev or Amit or Nag mentioned, companies that are just using data to improve their own businesses. I think the next few years are going to be very, very, very interesting.
Cameron, are you excited about the next decade?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think one of the most exciting things in this space is just the pace of innovation and the amount of innovation. And you look at the type of things that customers are now achieving. We're really only limited by our imagination, and as cloud enables performance of anything that we want to do at the lowest possible cost. We really have a limitless capability. So it'll be super exciting to see what customers do over the next decade. You couldn't predict it. It'll be an amazing time and very exciting to be a part of it.
Absolutely. I think on that note, we've had some fabulous points being raised by our panelists. And one thing is pretty clear: data will lead the way, and companies that sort of excel at integrating data into their strategy, operations, and culture will outpace many others and their peers in the years to come. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today, and thank you to our audience for taking time out. It's been a lovely discussion. So from all of us at Forbes India, we wish you the best, especially during these times, and we hope all of you stay safe.
Forbes India presents AWS The Mavericks in association with Matrix Partners India.